Their box that they had put Jesus in was too small, and Jesus exploded out of the box to their shock.
Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Living truth.
This is Living Truth. Welcome to Living Truth. What a blessing and privilege it is to be able to gather in this way each week, to worship our God and learn from His Word together. We hope you've been challenged and encouraged by our series on minimalism with Pastor Brett over the past 3 weeks. You can revisit the series and all our past messages online at any time by visiting livingtruth.ca. Today, we're hearing from our guest speaker and good friend, Dr. Peter Chu, who is a part-time instructor at Tyndale Seminary and a trauma and general surgeon at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center. He'll be sharing a message with us entitled, Will You Get in the Boat? Let's join Peter for today's message.
So we're in Mark chapter 4, verse 35 and 41 today. It is a very familiar story. I'll just read it. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Now, the Sea of Galilee was the home sea for at least 4 of the disciples. They had fished in it, swam in it, dove into it their whole lives. They knew that water. They basically told Jesus, "You just sit back, relax, we got this." They were also crossing it in the evening at nighttime. That in itself was not a concern. Most of the time, fishing occurred either late at night or early in the morning because the water was calmer and it was cooler. In the heat of the day, the fish dove into the deep water, but at night, as it cooled, the fish came back up to the surface. So crossing the Sea of Galilee at night was not a source of concern for them. As they're crossing, the great storm develops. In the Greek, it's actually a series of adjectives compounded together to emphasize the magnitude and intensity of the storm. Literally, a great hurricane of wind, a great storm of wind developed on the water. It wasn't a rainstorm, it was a windstorm. But what happens is that the wind whips up the waves start to fill the boat, and the boat begins to sink. Where's Jesus? He's asleep on a cushion at the back of the boat. We have a contrast here. Same boat, same sea, same storm. Jesus is sleeping, the disciples are freaking out. There's a contrast for us. Then we have the first question. Teacher, don't you care if we drown? It's a rhetorical question. What they're really saying is, teacher, you don't care that we drown. The question reveals the attitude and expectations of the disciples. First, there was a distinction that they had drawn. You are Jesus, we are the disciples. You're sleeping, we're struggling to keep the boat afloat. Second, there's an expectation. He was their teacher, rabbi. They expected participation, sharing in their efforts of keeping the boat afloat. They expected leadership, ideas, solutions, encouragement. Jesus was sleeping. There was also limitation. When they spoke to Jesus, it was an accusation. You don't care. They did not see Jesus as the Lord of the universe who could do something about the storm. There was no cry of, save us, because we know you can. There was just an accusation. There was a limitation to what they believed Jesus could do. And we see that limitation at the very end of the story. They're shocked that the wind and the waves obey Jesus. And lastly, they draw a wrong conclusion. They look at Jesus sleeping and they conclude he doesn't care. Do you not care? But we often do the same thing. When God is silent and is still, we draw the conclusion that he's abandoned us or that he's apathetic towards our situation. What the Bible tells us is God is always with us, whether he's moving mountains, parting waters, crushing our enemies, or he's just gently whispering to us. And even in silence, he's right there with us because he's sitting next to us, just sitting, not saying anything. Silence and stillness does not mean God is not there. This was something the disciples were about to learn. Because where was Jesus? In the boat, on the sea, in the storm, with them. Well, what about the storm? Who sent the storm? Well, if God is sovereign, either he allowed the storm to happen or he sent it. When a storm hits, while we are obeying Jesus and God in the boat, we have a few questions. First, was it a mistake to get in the boat? So we review this. The disciples go back to their minds. No. I'm sure Jesus said, get in the boat and go to the other side. So we're supposed to be in the boat. Why do I think it was a mistake to get in the boat? What has changed? When it was calm and it was evening, I was sure I was supposed to be in the boat. The only thing that's changed is now there's a storm. When it was calm, it was me and Jesus in the boat. I was sure I was supposed to be there. The only thing that's changed is now there's a storm. Jesus is still in the boat with me. Is it a mistake? No. But what happens is we have expectations. We have expectations that if we obey God, nothing bad will happen. We have the expectation of obligation. God, because I am obeying you and I got in the boat, you are obligated to make sure nothing bad happens to me. We have the expectation of negotiation. God, if I do this for you, then you have to make sure there are no storms. What Mark is telling us is the storm is not a factor because Jesus asked me to get in the boat. He's in the boat with me. The storm is not a factor. We're reminded over and over again, he's in the boat, on the sea, in the storm, with all the disciples. Now that they've woken him up, Jesus gets up from the back of the boat and he speaks the power of the divine spoken word. Quiet, be still. The words that he chooses are the same terms that are used when he drives out demons from people. It's terminology of exorcism. Quiet. Shut up, literally. And be still. Stop. And a great calm descends on the water. The term that's translated calm is actually a nautical term. It's a sailing term that Jesus uses. And it refers to quiet, tranquil water that is as smooth as glass. And the shoreline is mirrored on the surface of the water. That is the term he uses. With a spoken word, Jesus completely reverses the circumstances. The great storm becomes a great calm. Remember, Mark is trying to tell us the storm is a non-factor. If Jesus called us to get in the boat and he's in the boat with us, when the storm hits, it does not change anything. Now it's Jesus' turn to ask a question. Why are you so afraid? Why do you still have no faith? They had excessive fear and inadequate faith. Jesus had rebuked the wind and the waves, and now he's actually rebuking the disciples. Now, why was there an expectation on Jesus' part that they have less fear and more faith? Well, up until this point, they had seen him heal a paralytic that had been lowered through the roof of a house. He had healed a blind man, a lame man, a man with a shriveled hand. He had healed the centurion's servant from a distance. He didn't even go to the centurion's house. He just did it from where he stood. They had seen him heal Peter's mother-in-law. And they had seen him raise the widow of Nain's son from the dead. They had also heard amazing teaching, including the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus expected them to have more faith and less fear. Now, you would think that the reversal of their circumstances in such a dramatic fashion, a great storm to a great calm, would result in celebration or at least awe from the disciples. The reaction we read, they were terrified. The Greek is actually, they feared a great fear, to emphasize their reaction. Jesus had just said, why are you so afraid? The reaction is their fear increases. They go from being timid to absolute terror. The basis for their fear is they don't know who Jesus is. Who is this? It is the question that hangs over all of the Gospels. Who is Jesus? They also had a very small box that they had put Jesus in. Even the wind and the waves obey him. They did not expect Jesus to be able to calm the storm. Yes, Jesus can heal. He can make the lame walk and the blind see, but he cannot control the forces of nature. Their box that they had put Jesus in was too small, and Jesus exploded out of the box to their shock. Now, usually, when we get to the end of the passage, the speaker will give 3 to 4 points that we draw from the story. The first one is usually obedience. Jesus asked the disciples to get in the boat. Will we get in the boat if Jesus asks us? Let go and leave behind what's on this side. The safe, the secure, the successful. Let it go. Get in the boat and go to the other side. Will we get in the boat? Are we willing to leave all that we know, what's safe, secure, and successful? We might not want to get in the boat because we know from this passage that if you get in the boat, there's going to be a storm. And we also know, if we get in the boat, there's going to be a storm. He might show up and ask us to get out of the boat and walk on water. We know there's another story about a boat on a sea and a storm. We don't want to walk on water and have Jesus ask us because we're afraid we're going to sink, just like Peter. But the reality is, only a select few are given the privilege of being invited to walk on water. Only a select few are given the privilege of being invited to walk on water. Before that invitation ever comes, we first have to be willing to get in the boat. Most of us will be asked to get in the boat and go to the other side. Peter is the only one that was asked to walk on water. The Apostle Paul, he got on a lot of boats. He went to a lot of other sides. Storms, at least 3 shipwrecks. He never once was asked to walk on water. He just kept getting on boats and going to the other side that God directed him to do. The second point that's often brought up as a conclusion to this passage is obedience will bring storms. There is no guarantee that when you obey God, it will not be tough. We know that from this passage. What has not changed? God's request to get in the boat has not changed even when the storm hits. And Jesus reversed the storm and replaced it with a calm by speaking. The third point that's often brought up is, well, where was Jesus? He's right there with us, in the boat, on the sea, in the storm. The last point is usually, because of the first 3, we should respond with faith and not fear. But these 4 conclusions do not answer the big question that hangs over the whole story. Why did Jesus cross the sea? To find that answer, you actually have to keep going. You have to push beyond the chapter division and head into chapter 5. Why did Jesus cross the sea? Why did he want to go to the other side? When we dive into chapter 5, we realize, oh, it's another familiar story. But the 2 are actually connected. When the boat arrives, the disciples, they're tired, they're cold, they're wet, they're hungry. They've been up all night battling the storm. All they want is a fire, some food, and maybe a nap. All of a sudden, they hear this ear-piercing shrieking. This basically naked man is running towards them, possessed by evil spirits. And they are thinking, Jesus, what are you doing? This side is where we will find warmth, food, rest. The other side is this demon-possessed man. The other side is where the graveyard is, the herd of pigs. And Jesus, can we remind you, we're actually in Gentile territory. No good Jewish boy should be even on this side of the lake. We know how the story unfolds. Jesus heals the man, drives out the evil spirits, and frees the man from the bondage and restores him to his family and his community. The reaction is quite interesting. A crowd has gathered from the cities and the countryside. First, they were curious. Verse 14 of chapter 5. They came out to see what had happened. When they see the man who previously they knew as the demon-possessed man, sitting there, clothed, quiet, they were afraid. Verse 15. And then when they heard about the pigs that had ran over the cliff and drowned themselves, they were terrified. They begged Jesus to leave. A fear descended on them. Now, in contrast, the man begged to go with Jesus. But Jesus actually says to him, no, go back to your family and to your community. Be restored to what was taken from you, your community. What happens next? The disciples think, well, this is good. Let's go get food, let's get warm, and get some rest. Jesus says, no, boys. Let's get back in the boat. You can picture the disciples, all their mouths just dropped open. We're doing what? We just got here. You want us to get back in the boat? You mean we went through all that? The nighttime crossing, the storm, we're soaked, we're wet, we're hungry. We did all that for this man? Jesus, this wasn't worth it. Jesus had crossed over to the other side for one man. We love the fact that Jesus would go after the lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost son. But what if he turns to us and says, Peter, I want you to leave this side, what is safe, secure, and successful, get in the boat, go to the other side, and find the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son for me. I might say, you know what, Jesus, you've got 99 sheep. What's missing one? Jesus, if you got the 9 coins, why do you want another coin? And Jesus, you've got the good son, the responsible, disciplined, organized one. Why do you want the rebellious one? What I'm really saying to Jesus is, it's not worth it. Jesus, when you do the risk-benefit analysis, it's not worth it. It's not strategic, Jesus. And Jesus, the return on investment is not compelling. I'm telling Jesus, I don't think this person is worth me, my sacrifice, my preparation. And Jesus, I don't think this person is worth you. We also know that when Jesus arrived as a baby, no one welcomed him and his family. And as Brett pointed out to us over the Christmas preaching series, Joseph and Mary's own family didn't receive them. He had gone to his hometown where all of his relatives should be. No one received him. Jesus is teaching and healing and freeing and delivering people. Some believe, but most reject him. He's hanging on the cross, and we are taunting and abusing him. Did he ever think we weren't worth it? Let me finish the story, because it's actually not over. 2 chapters later, Jesus returns to this region. And this time, the crowd comes to him, and they bring a deaf man. And instead of begging Jesus to leave, this time they beg Jesus to heal the deaf man that is in their community. And when Jesus does that, what we are told, the crowd responded in amazement. What had changed? Jesus had healed the man possessed by evil spirits, said to him, stay in your community. You are a living testimony of who I am. And as that community now lived with this transformed, healed, freed man, they realized God had touched their cities. And when Jesus came the next time, they were ready to receive him. God had a purpose that the disciples did not see. It was worth it. Will we get in the boat when he calls? Because he will call. He will disrupt our lives and ask us to get in the boat. When we're in the boat, there will be storms. But Mark tells us that he is faithful and he is capable. He's in the boat with us. Same sea, same storm. And with one word, he can take care of the storm. And lastly, if Jesus has called us to get in the boat and go to the other side, it's worth it because he thinks it's worth it.
Join us next week for a message from Charles Price. This is Living Truth.
Thank you for sending your Holy Spirit to dwell in us, to strengthen us, Lord, to guide us today. Though we may be scattered, we're all over the world, your church. You are present with us. And we lift up one cry of praise to you today, Lord. You called me out upon the waters, the great unknown, where feet may fail, and there I find you in the mystery, in oceans deep, my faith will stand.
And I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. For I am yours, and you are mine.
Your grace abounds in deepest waters. Your sovereign hand will be my guide. Your feet may fail and fear surrounds me. Oh, you never fail, and you won't start now.
I will call upon your name.
Yes.
Keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. For I am yours, and you are mine. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me.
Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior.
Spirit,